The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, TechBytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Well, here we are for another special edition of TechBytes and the IFBTA's actual Welcome to Our Member series. In meeting our member, we have to meet our conversation guest today, Ken Ogami, who is the head of retail and hospitality and industry solutions for Palo Alto Networks. So welcome to the IFBTA.
Rob, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So I should point out that Palo Alto Networks is an industry partner of the IFBTA, and I guess we would say the word global because you guys are a global company, and our conversations, even right after you started, had to do with global clients, global customers, and how you meet that market.
Yes. So as you talked about just a moment ago, we are a national or international cybersecurity company. We operate in the Europe region, JPAC, as well as North America.
So you have a specialty. I mean, your title itself, talks about, the hospitality, the retail and hospitality industry.
Yes.
So you are global. You cover a lot of industries and a lot of space. But what makes you special in those industries?
So I have a few counterparts, but a little bit about my background is before I joined Palo, I came from the customer side. So I worked in retail for the past 15 years as a CISO and as a CTO, implementing the technologies, implementing these cyber products and solutions. And this was something that allowed me, when I came over to Palo in the vendor space, I understood what companies and customers dealt with day in and day out. We get inundated with emails. People want my time. I get phone calls, people pitching me sales products. And I now understand the challenges that they face because I'm trying to now get their time. So I'm reaching out to them, trying to provide a value add to let them know about, hey, you might have business challenges. I've lived through those business challenges myself. Let me talk a little bit about how we can help you.
So so 15 years in the customer space,
Yes.
That's a long time. A lot of people, they always say, about going over to the other side, right?
Yes.
So, but clearly you saw a vision of where technology was going to head in the retail industry.
Yes.
That you said, hey, maybe I need to be on board to protect and do those pieces. So what was it that you personally saw that, really led you to make that change?
The retail hospitality group doesn't get enough credit for how progressive they are related to implementing digital technology. The nature of what the customers that are dealing with expecting a digital analog experience is different than, let's say, healthcare, where they're more slow to adopt change and incorporate new technologies. Financial services tends to be more conservative. Manufacturing as an industry tends to be a little bit slower to implement widespread changes. But in retail, the customers demand it. And we see this with loyalty applications. We see this with personalized recommendations when we do our shopping and apparel. We see this with the ability to buy online and get our coffee, drinks, and order our food and go to the restaurants and pick it up and grab and go. Those all were expectations from people and the customers that created that drive for technology to build these technologies, and where I come in, secure those technologies and put them at the forefront of what technology can do in our user base. And now AI, you can't go more than a day without someone mentioning the letters A and I together.
Oh, we only went 5 minutes.
And so they're expecting it, right? And
they are, but if we just back up for a second, you just said something really interesting to me. It sounds like it's a paradox. It's not the right thing. So you would have thought that the healthcare industry and the financial industry
Yes.
would have been the first to adopt because of all the data security and cyber, theft and everything that goes on with medical information, with credit card and financial information. Now, the only theory I can come up with here is that because the retail world was not a digital world before, but it's quickly become one, that maybe they stepped up to the latest and greatest and recognized the threat because more consumers are getting involved. But the assumption would have been in financial and medical that they would have stepped up and been quicker to move.
It's a great observation, Rob. And there's two talk tracks for this. The first is regulation and compliance. So because of, let's take financial services, FINRA, SEC, OFAC, those regulations create a lot of overhead, both administratively and technically, of they want to make a change, but they have to ensure all their T's are crossed and I's are dotted because they are regulated, and they can get in trouble with massive financial implications. They can get fined, bottom line. So anytime they have to put in a new technology, they have to be very conscious of how we can make sure that we're following the regulation and those rules and policies and procedures before they make those type of changes. Two, the second talk track here is related to these organizations are massive battleships. And steering those battleships takes a lot of momentum and a lot of time to steer the ships. They're not nimble, they're not agile, and they're not incentivized to be, right? So they want to make sure that if a technology they're considering is out in the market for a while, are tested, because the customers and people in general aren't necessarily pushing them to implement those new technologies because it's my money, I want to keep it safe. Now, amplify that with the healthcare industry, right? You have HIPAA compliance. There's a lot of other regulation as well for healthcare that gets impacted from a privacy standpoint, as well as implementing technology. They're not motivated to be front runners in most cases, because if you were going to go in for surgery or if you were going to go in and bring your family in for an ER visit, you want something that's tried and true. So the risk versus reward is not necessarily there. Retail, completely different, where younger generations are expecting this type of implementation. You know, the iPhone is a classic example of the consumer iPhone drove that adoption, where enterprises were still using BlackBerries or had no BYOD or cell phone policies at all in place. So it was the consumer market that drove that, and
What's a
retail was the
BlackBerry?
forefront. Exactly.
No, but you know what? You actually have just created another interesting point.
Yeah.
Because as I think about this, the healthcare industry, and the financial industry have been around a long time, and how people use the technology in them is still very old school. But e-commerce and, kids growing up from online ordering of food to, all the retail e-commerce and things, that whole industry really only grew up in the last 10, 12, 15 years, and then got accelerated because of COVID. So in reality, that buyer and shopper has grown up with the technology. And so that technology had to move forward as well, especially when you went from on-prem systems to off-premise based systems, which is a big move that happened in retail and food service.
Absolutely. And that's where the mobile experience comes in, primarily driven with loyalty applications. And you're still seeing large QSR and food restaurants that just implemented their loyalty applications fairly recently.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you're getting to see it all. So let's back up a moment and just sort of talk about, the sweet spot target market that Palo Alto, really helps to, work with and solve challenges and issues for in partnership, in hospitality food service. So where is that sweet spot?
So Palo's unique in the cyberspace because we offer this platform play, we call it, or a portfolio. Our other cybersecurity companies in the technology space tend to make one product, and they're very good at it, and that's all they sell. And I've been a customer of those for many years. That's not a bad knock on them by any stretch. But that is the primary, who makes up the majority of the cybersecurity market are companies that make one product and you adopt that product. And as a customer, you buy 8, 9, 10 different vendors and you have 8 or 9 different products and you piecemeal them together and you have this portfolio, but it's somewhat complicated. What makes Palo Alto unique is we have a product for everything across east, west, north, south. And the goal is normally people start with one product, normally our firewalls. That's what we're famous for. That's how I got involved with Palo, 10 years ago as a customer, as I bought their firewalls. And since then, they have incorporated and built technologies that cover endpoint protection, also known as antivirus, network security, penetration testing, all these things that were one-offs. We offer it wholly. It's a complete platform from A to Z. And there's no right or wrong, but I'll highlight the benefits and the positives that having one vendor and one partner that can provide multiple tools for you. It simplifies the communication, it eases the administration. The team, the company itself doesn't have to have 8 different specialists for 8 different companies and products they own. If they synergize into one like ourselves, we help make things easier and simpler.
And there's too many touch points with, I mean, I don't think that people actually realize within a restaurant environment, actually how many touch points there are when you start considering connected kitchens, energy, sustainability, the point of sale, the kiosks, bring your own device, the customer logging in, I don't think that we're totally aware of all of those points of access and everything that really goes through that hub and channel within our operations. And we certainly can't expect our people that work and manage these to know that.
No. And Rob, I'll go back to our earlier conversation where retail and hospitality have a unique challenge. And that's why I chose to kind of focus on this area. Financial services, they have a headquarters, wherever that beautiful building is, and they might have a data center somewhere. And that's more or less the extent. But retail hospitality, and specifically talking to our customers and listeners now, they have potentially 2,000 restaurants that people can physically visit and physically be in and physically hack and cause security incidents because the locations are open to the public. So everything you said is amplified because they're publicly accessible, and there's usually hundreds, if not thousands, of locations that people can go to. And think of the biggest QSR restaurants that are international and the number of locations. And then you go into that restaurant, and then you see now they have touchscreen digital kiosks where you go into the lobby and you place your order. You think of hotels and hospitality where guest Wi-Fi and people are doing Zoom calls and taking meetings and depending on that Wi-Fi experience. You see where we buy online, pick up in store, all driven through e-commerce in the cloud, where the orders are being pushed to the store themselves, and then the associates are now making the food and the drinks for people. All of IoT, OT devices, smart. I'm seeing customers implement smart ovens. A big thing is smart trash cans, where to simplify the process, where there's little lasers that when the trash hits and breaks that laser, it triggers a service call for the sanitation department to go make their rounds to the locations to take the trash out and centralize that. So IoT devices are at the forefront in retail and hospitality and QSR more than any other industry.
But there really are a lot. And by the way, I would point out in the hospitality lodging environment, then you have the ecosystem of the room itself. Because you're not only connecting in the public spaces, but and the employees are, but you also are now connecting in 500 different locations within, right? That have a lot of information going through. But that actually brings up a different thing. You've pointed out a number of touch points that occur, let's say, within the 4 walls, or if you include the drive-through outside and all those other things that are there. That means you also have to work with other providers that are providing those core systems that are there. So how does integration work, and what's your relationship as it relates to all of the different system providers that are within this ecosystem?
So 97% of large retailers have had a third-party breach through one of their partners. And there's countless stories and metrics, and you can Google and see, big names that I don't want to mention on the call, but it's easy to find, where they're secure, but their third-party providers are not necessarily as secure. And that's where the incident happens, right? The weakest link in the chain. So supply chains, third-party access, which we all depend on. I worked in apparel for a long time. We did international manufacturing. I worked at retailers where we would partner with third-party security companies to provide security. We know in the grocery and QSL market, they're dependent on getting the food delivery, from the wholesaler to the warehouse, and then the distributor warehouse then goes to the actual retail chain and franchise. So we're so commingled with supply chain that it creates even another expanded point of threat surface. We talked about how the locations themselves are at risk because of all the technology being incorporated. But now we also have a dependent on supply chain that can also be compromised. And this is where we're trying to help, right? Is we know digital transformation is being driven by the business. We know there's some innate risk with the technology implementation. Palo helps secure that. And that's where myself and our team helps because we're specialized. We care about this industry. We have the expertise. We see it with other customers so we can learn and apply that to future customers to help better secure things and scale.
Well, it's really a partnership, isn't it? Of
Yes.
sorts. Yeah, but you're also an information resource. So if somebody's reaching out to you and they want to tap into the unique expertise that you and your team have for our industry,
Yes.
okay, how do they connect and how do they stay engaged, as the process? I mean, what are those touch points and the special sauce that makes that relationship work really well, as it did for your former employer, and somehow you ended up here. So it must have worked out okay.
Yes, it did, Rob. And the bottom line here is we truly care, right? So I'm here with you, right? And we're partners with IFBTA. We're partners with the National Retail Federation. There's this technical group called the ISAC, Information Sharing Analysis Center, that is a nonprofit that brings lots of retailers and QSR
And
and
they do
restaurants.
hospitality too.
They
They
do
go across.
hospitality as well. And we sponsor because we are champions for knowledge sharing and growth in these different consortiums to have the customers work with other customers and knowledge share their trials and tribulations and the challenges they're facing because we're all in it together, right? We don't want the bad guys to win. At the end of the day, yes, there might be competition amongst some of these similar sub verticals of retail and hospitality. But at the end of the day, we're trying to help and protect. We don't want to lose because of a cyber breach. We want to lose because we don't have the best product or the best.
Everybody loses when that happens. The industry loses. You know, I I hear more and more that when you're dealing in franchise environments with franchisees, how do you bring them in the fold to make sure that they do it, because their breach becomes your breach, right? Anywhere globally. I mean, we all hear about these things. So, what is your advice, as it relates? I mean, if there's a couple of bullet points that you would give. I sit next to you on a plane,
Yeah.
and I don't know you, and I don't know much about the industry. I say, listen, can you give me those two or three things? Why the food service restaurant industry? What is it that they may or may not be doing that they should be doing?
So what we're seeing as a trend holistically, specifically with QSR, because I meet with a number of QSR accounts, I'll say first the store of the future. So that can mean a lot of things, but store of the future means how they are implementing digital technologies in the store and how do we secure those.
Right.
Second, we just talked about it, is securing the supply chain. Is as we are becoming international, as we have more partners and relationships, how do we secure the supply chain? And third is how do we ensure data privacy via e-commerce? So as you provide your personal information in a loyalty application, how you present and store your credit card information within these accounts, uh,
Hmm.
all of this personal information, which could lead to brand damage, that's brand loyalty is very top of mind for QSR because they want to try to keep the customers engaged to themselves and they want to ensure that they keep coming back regularly. And if you're a loyal application or a loyal application member, we offer discounts or we do incentives. We want to try to keep the customer spending with us longer over their lifetime. And the potential brand damage would be, uncountable. It's just you can't.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about the lifetime value of the guest.
It
So,
is.
I mean, they're really, and if you break that chain, you don't get them back. They start somewhere else that's in there. Um, so you have to really come in there. You see this, in a particular way. So when people engage with you, then,
Mhm.
how are they engaging with you? Because you also have a lot of partners and you engage on multiple channels with a customer.
Yes. So most accounts and companies have what we call value-added resellers or integrators that help them with all their technology needs, not just cybersecurity, application software, networking, e-commerce. It's a portfolio of technology services, and we work with those integrators to be the subject matter experts specifically for cybersecurity, that they will bring us in with maybe other competitors as well. And that's what we want. We want to win on merit. We believe we offer the best product for the cost. And these integrators then broker meetings with ourselves and others to come in, meet with the accounts, present why we would be the best choice. And sometimes we're not, but most of the time we are. And that's where our industry scope and our specialty with working with similar QSRs and restaurants gives us an edge over our competitors, because we actually know we've done it, we've implemented for similar models, and they'll bring us in, we'll make our pitch, we'll talk to them about why our products can help them. And then at that point, it's up to the account or the customer or the company to then make what they feel is the best decision.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
You really talk the language of the customer. I mean, you look at your background.
Yes.
And by the way, it occurs to me that through your background, because I think you were with Westfield,
Yes.
Your background would have worked with a ton of retailers.
Yes.
Being with Westfield. So, in that environment, not only, were you working in the shopping centers and the malls, but you're also connecting to everybody else's environment that's in there. And so you personally probably have a very unique, relationship and understanding of the different needs and what differentiates one retailer versus another, including food service people, because they're all there too.
Absolutely. I've personally implemented and built out 3 food courts where we operated. This was during COVID. A lot of this was. So we wanted to do where people could order via kiosks. The kiosks then shared all the restaurants within the food court. So people could go to one kiosk and order from any of the restaurants within the food court and pick up the food directly, all through digital integration, and partnered with a number of different, I don't know if I can say company names we worked with, but many QSR restaurants. Right. But we also did high-end fine dining as well, and implemented some of the exclusive on the West Coast and East Coast. We did Italy, we did Javier's, which are very high-end restaurants as well. And, implementing how we could get their technology through our network at the property to provide the services they need. And again, at the end of the day, security was foundational in any of these implementations, because no one wants to get.
Well, I think that the two things that come to mind, first of all, is that in a global environment, how many companies go global? And at the very start of this conversation, you were talking about the differentiation between fintech and you're talking about the healthcare industry. And one of the things we were talking about is compliance and regulation. Well, as soon as you're in the restaurant business and you start doing Brazil and you're doing fiscal, or you're doing this or you're doing that, there's also compliance and regulation, not just with supply chain and food safety, but as you go to different, parts of the world, and how they handle credit card transactions and how they handle employee records. So that's a nuance and a complexity that your company is able to handle because you are global.
Yes.
In that, which also helps your customers to scale. They don't have to switch partners if they want to scale.
Correct. And we operate in all these regions. We understand what the local regulations are. They are unique in some cases. Maybe on our next call, we can go into some funny stories about what we've had to overcome. And I continue to see, as the current market too, things are going to change over the next 12 months related to this. And we are big enough and dynamic enough that we will do what we can. If it's related to unique shipping or origin being local, we will accommodate and make sure things are delivered.
So I just want to point out that I think I know where you're headed with that
yes.
comment, but very specifically, when you are predicting the future or seeing where changes and how you fit in, could you just sort of give me an example of what you think is going to happen, what might happen? Nobody can really predict the future, but the next 9 to 12 months, not only where you think that trend or what the concern should be, somebody should be thinking about now, and then how would Palo Alto come in there, and what are you guys thinking ahead on?
So I'll be somewhat technical, and then we can drive into some of the business thought. But technically, we are cloud first. So what is cloud? Cloud is where the technology basically is accessible through the internet. And that model matters because it eliminates having to procure hardware, and might be hardware limitations, it might be shipping logistics. There's a lot of challenges related to procuring hardware, implementing hardware, and updating hardware regularly because things break.
And there could be some hardware challenges in purchasing and sourcing going forward. So I think I get that one.
Yes, where we operate in the cloud. So we already have the infrastructure that's accessible as long as you have an internet connection that we update for you. Why this matters is, let's say you're a restaurant that has 500 locations and you have 500 pieces of hardware that you need to update. In the Palo model and with our technology, all you need is an internet connection, and we update centrally at our headquarters and our data centers, and that automatically gets refreshed and is live for all locations instantly for our customers. So that's why people say, why do I want to be in the cloud? Why do I care about the cloud? Well, it lets you be more agile and nimble because we make one change in one location and updates 500 places instantly. And that's not just 500, it's globally. But
and if there's a problem somewhere, you can change fast,
very quickly
across the whole portfolio.
Very quickly, yes. So us being cloud native allowed us to implement quickly, deploy quickly. And that's one of the reasons people love working with us and they integrate with us, because we can address their problems usually in 3 to 6 months.
And so to be very clear on that particular point, even though they may be using different partner products or people that brought you in, you really are at the backbone of this to be able to manage cloud first. So you're actually managing all that traffic transaction, and how the business actually gets done is really flowing through Palo Alto.
Absolutely. And we have an outstanding world-class customer service and operations team 24/7. We have something called incident cases, where if there is ever a problem or a question, they can reach out directly to their account team, which is within our group, answer those questions in real time, provide real-time updates. We can escalate if we need senior leaders or senior engineers to get involved, but the buck stops with us.
You take the responsibility for it. And what I've also heard here is even forward thinking. There's no way, that the normal operator can think ahead as to what's going to happen. But that really is your job as well, to bring that, actually to think ahead, put it in place, and maybe not even have them bring up the word AI in the future, that you just did it, right? There's probably a slogan in there that we ought to figure out like what that slogan is going to be. Yes. But we can't use "just do it," but we'll come up with something. We'll come up with something in there that really works towards it. So, just out of curiosity, you made the change, and you're on this side, and you really took on. I mean, you came from the retail world. Yes. And you had that piece, as you pointed out, in food service. Is there something that took you by surprise when you came into this industry that you just hadn't expected? Positive, negative, just something that was your aha moment?
I started my career in financial, and then when I made the move to retail, I loved how quick we were able to make change in a positive way. And we kind of underlying theme throughout this whole discussion, but I love that, we're very customer centric. We are very sensitive to trends and what people are expecting in their day to day. And I think that's going to change in the next 8 or 10 years as well. Right. And I'll bring up AI again, because the power of AI and what people are expecting, the colleges and universities are changing the way tests are being done, expectations, the idea of friendships and relationships are going to change with what AI is going to happen. I really think retail hospitality will be at the forefront of those changes in testing, and some things will go well, some things will go bad. And that's what I love most.
That's because we have a lot of interaction points between the customer, and we're starting to see, the voice at the drive-through. We're starting to see the call centers that are doing reservations, and taking orders. So you're right. It's probably customer forward and thinking about where new technology and innovation is going to happen, but also because you have generational customers that can adapt very quickly, it's probably a great place to be.
Absolutely. And recommendations, having a personal experience, having a customer service representative that may even be more efficient. I've been through a couple of drive-throughs recently where the ordering was all automated via AI, where you placed your order through the drive-through, they received the order, and it was 100% accurate. The delivery and the handoff to me was still a person, but I can see this with IoT and robotics just continuing to evolve.
Well, the delivery and handoff will probably change as well. So last question for you. We got to know each other, it's about 6-8 months ago.
Yes.
And so, you sort of stepped into the relationship with the IFBTA, but, why the IFBTA? Where do you see, that helping out Palo Alto and the industry, and certainly investing as an industry partner makes a difference to us. But where do you see the value of that relationship?
It's a sub-vertical, right? I mean, we talked about retail hospitality a few times, but food, QSR, this is really even more progressive because of the dynamic, finicky nature of customers and what they want. So we're seeing a lot of great ideas with a lot of brands, big brands, of how they're changing with the current landscape. And what does all that mean? It's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but because of these progressive technology implementations, we want to be close to them because we need to know how to secure these ideas quick and fast because they're at the forefront. So it gives us insights to see where they're trailblazers. And IFBTA and the companies within that you work with, they're trailblazers in this space. And we need to make sure we're aligned because we want to ensure that we're securing those solutions day one, right? And we're not an afterthought. So we see this as a forefront and as a test of what is to come across all industries. So we're aligning ourselves here to make sure that we're not ahead of the curve, but we're staying with the curve.
Well, to be clear, it's a two-way alignment because we see the future as the word digital in there and cloud, cloud forward and cloud first. I would agree with that. And so certainly, having a partner like Palo Alto and somebody who's as knowledgeable in the industry as you are, really, I think is mutually beneficial to our membership. And I think that's really because it's a ideas sharing. So you can go ahead and take the excitement and innovation that comes out of the industry and they can get your experience, globally on multi-industry, global and the different ways of doing business and perhaps that crystal ball to the future. So, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation on our member series here. Just there's a lot to think about, and I suspect that there's going to be some other conversations to come. And so I have Ken Ogami, who is the head of retail and hospitality industry solutions for Palo Alto Networks. Just glad to have you join us today for a conversation.
Thank you so much, Rob. Great conversation.
This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of TechBytes, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.